Welcome to the Joseph Goldstein Insight Hour. This podcast is an expression of our shared interest in self-discovery. Join Joseph as he shares his deep knowledge of the path of mindfulness. If you are interested in supporting this podcast, please go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/Joseph.
This afternoon I'd like to continue the discussion and practice of the Metta meditation. And just as a reminder, it's really a very simple quality of wishing well for people. The most simple expression of it is, may you be happy. And it's not wanting anything back, it's not in exchange for anything. It's just the development of that capacity for well-wishing. And it has a lot of different nuances in terms of the feeling. 50 Shades of Metta. It was more about the 50, you know. So, lest you be taken down the wrong path, I'll read a few. I'd like to read a few poems, which just express some of these different aspects of it, different ways we can manifest this feeling. And then we'll get into the practice a little bit and just talk about, some different styles or ways of cultivating this quality. So these are just a few poems and writings. The first one is called Shoulders, and it's by the Palestinian-American poet Naomi Shihab Nye. Who I know you're familiar with her. She's a wonderful poet. So this is what she wrote. A man crosses the street in the rain, stepping gently, looking 2 times north and south, because his son is asleep on his shoulder. No car must splash him. No car drive too near to his shadow. This man carries the world's most sensitive cargo, but he's not marked. Nowhere does his jacket say fragile, handle with care. His ear fills up with breathing. He hears the hum of a boy's dream deep inside him. We're not going to be able to live in this world if we're not willing to do what he's doing with one another. The road will only be wide and the rain will never stop falling. And so it's just found such a beautiful image. The father carrying his son on his shoulders across the road with that care. We're not going to be able to live in this world if we're not willing to do what he's doing with one another. So sometimes just simple images can evoke the quality of metta within us. And so we just, either a poem or an image of someone or is a way of calling forth that feeling within us. This was written, this is an informal rendition of a poem by the Persian poet Hafez, created by Daniel Ladinsky. And the title of it is The Sun Never Says. Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky. And that's the quality of metta. It's never a quality of I love you and you owe me for this, or I want something in return. It's just like the sun, shining on the earth. It's that quality of radiating the felt wish, may you be happy. I love the practice and the discussion of this because it's about a feeling that at the same time is incredibly simple. It's not complicated and so profound in terms of how it affects how we are in the world. So this is from the French essayist Montaigne, and he's describing, it's a platonic relationship he has, the deepest friendship of his life, and it was a profound relationship for him. And the way he expressed it, again, I think it captures just another shade of metta. He said, in a truly loving relationship, which I have experienced, rather than drawing the one I love to me, I give myself to him. Not merely do I prefer to do him good than to have him do good to me, I would even prefer that he did good to himself rather than to me. It is when he does good to himself that he does most good to me. If his absence is either pleasant or useful to him, then it delights me far more than his presence. To me, that just captures the completely selfless quality of metta. That it's really about the happiness of the other person. And that's what we're wishing for. And so that last line, if that other person's absence, is pleasant or useful, that gives me more happiness than his presence would be for me. And so, do you see the beauty of that? It's really selfless. We're not in it for what we're getting. And so the last one I want to read is, a wonderful poem by Goldstein. It's called Saint Francis and the Sow. And this is just part of the poem. It's the first stanza. The bud stands for all things, even for those things that don't flower. For everything flowers from within of self-blessing, though sometimes it is necessary to reteach a thing its loveliness, to put a hand on its brow of the flower and retell it in words and in touch, it is lovely, until it flowers again from within of self-blessing. So really in our metta practice, that's what we're doing. We're reteaching a thing, whether it's ourselves or other people. We're reteaching each one of us its loveliness. That's the power of metta and the effect of metta, until it flowers again from within of self-blessing. So all of these, the father carrying son with tremendous care across the road. The understanding that the sun shines on all of us without any expectation. There's no I owe you or you owe me. And Montaigne's understanding that in this feeling, it's really about the happiness of the other person. It's not for something we get back. And that's what we get back, is the happiness that comes from that feeling, you know. And the understanding that it really does reteach us our loveliness. So these are all aspects, you know, of metta. So as Jill mentioned, I think yesterday, there are many ways. There are many ways of practicing this. There are two main purposes of doing metta meditation, or aspirations with regard to it. One is metta, or loving kindness, can be used as a vehicle for developing concentration. So not only for the metta quality itself, but it is a technique or a method for developing strong concentration, even to the point of absorption or jhana. So there's a very specific technique or techniques for that. The other purpose or aspiration with regard to its practice is not so much for deepening concentration, although it will have that effect to some extent, but it's more the aspiration as we do the practice, just in a more general way, to cultivate that capacity in ourselves for metta, for caring, for loving kindness. So it's not so interested, or the main objective is not so much that absorption, but rather just to fill the heart with that feeling and to be able to express it in the many ways we do. So in this second understanding or way of practicing it, which is what we're doing here, you can be very creative. We'll give some suggestions, you know, for how to practice it, but in terms of the language one uses, the phrases one uses, how it's done, we'll offer, you know, a variety of approaches. And just as you sit and practice it, experiment a little and see what resonates the most, what connects you the most to this practice. So traditionally, there are three components in doing the metta practice. One component is having a clear perception of who we're sending it to. And that could be ourselves. It could be, in the traditional list of people, it would be, you know, a great benefactor for whom it's very easy to feel metta, or a good friend, or a neutral person, somebody we don't have many feelings for one way or another, or a difficult person, or all beings. So there are many different categories, you know, of beings that we can be directing the metta towards. So that's one component, have a clear perception. Okay, we're wishing well to you. You know, we know who we're directing it towards. And again, it can go from ourselves, through all these individuals, to all beings. But we have a clear sense of direction for the metta. So that's one component. The second component is the support for the feeling, which are different phrases that we actually repeat in our practice. So it almost becomes like a mantra of loving kindness. You know, we settle on some phrases that express our wish, our kind wish, and we're repeating those phrases, concentrating on the meaning, directing it towards the image or the sense of the person. So the phrases themselves become a vehicle for cultivating the feeling. And the phrases, as I think Jill mentioned, there's a lot of creativity in finding those phrases that express it in a way that you resonate with. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you live at ease. May you live in safety. So in a way, it's finding 2, 3, or 4 phrases of things that you would most wish for yourself. In your life, what is most meaningful for you in terms of what you would wish for yourself? Because when you connect with those particular expressions, you'll be most connected to the wish for others. Because you feel it in yourself. Yes, just as I want to be happy, so may you be happy. Just as I want to live in safety, so may you live in safety. Just as I want to be free, so may you be free. So this is the second component of the whole practice. The first is who we're sending it to. The second are the phrases that we use to express this wish of care and kindness. And the third aspect is the actual feeling. The emotional feeling of loving kindness, of care, of whatever words resonate with you. It's that feeling of wishing well. So, keeping in mind that there are these 3 components, each of you may find it easier to give emphasis to one or the other. So, for example, for some people who can visualize easily, then it's very easy to hold the picture in the mind of the person you're sending it to. And again, it could be yourself or anybody, but you're really holding the image of that person in mind. And very often, especially when it's somebody for whom we already have a lot of love or care, sometimes simply being with the image evokes the feeling. You might think of a good friend, a really dear friend, and the image comes to mind, and you may not even need any words. The feeling is there, and when you see them, it's like we're with them. We can feel the feeling of metta arise. So for people for whom that's easy, you might want to give some emphasis to the image and keeping the image steady, as a way of evoking the feeling. Some people, holding images in the mind is quite difficult. Their minds don't particularly work in that way. So for them, the repetition of the phrases might be what's worth emphasizing. And so we're repeating this mantra of metta phrases. And it's good to settle on 2 or 3, so we can just really sink into each one and feel each one, and repeating, over and over again. And as we drop into the meaning of the words evokes the feeling. May you be happy. So some people may focus predominantly on the image, some people predominantly on the repetition of the phrases, and some people, just in a very easy way, may feel connected to the feeling of metta already. It's, for some people, it's very accessible, and it's right there. We just have to kind of drop into the heart space, and it's there. For people who have that connection, then you might give emphasis simply to the feeling and drop into the feeling of metta, and then let the feeling radiate out towards the person or towards all beings. So in all of these cases, we most likely will be using all 3 of the image, the phrases, the feeling. But I just found that it's helpful, since we are all conditioned somewhat differently in terms of what comes easily. You can use any one of those 3 doorways into the practice, predominantly. Okay, one last little thing before we just drop into a little time of practice. I found it in my own, I've done quite a bit of metta practice over the years, and it was transformative, and it wasn't easy. When I started, it was very difficult for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it was just because of an aberrant understanding of the practice. So at one time I was doing intensive metta practice, for a couple of months at a time, intensively. And for about a week or so, I had this crazy idea that the faster I said the phrases, the more metta would come. I don't know where that came from. So I was in Burma at the time. So I don't know, there was a whole week, but it was more than a few days. Maybe happy, maybe I was just revving the whole thing up. It was ridiculous. So it took me a little while to realize this is not the way. So like any other practice, for some people it's just really easy from the beginning, and for other people, for whatever reason, it's challenging in the beginning. It doesn't matter. The practice itself, as you do it and continue, is deeply transforming. It really changes how we are in relationship to the world and other beings. So just in terms of a little technique that came as I was doing the practice, I realized that one way was actually to have the feeling and the words be directed towards whoever, whether myself or other beings. So it was like that. And then at a certain point, I just played with a different perspective. And this became more viable when I got more connected with the feeling, and it was easier just to sit in the feeling. And so after you do the practice in whatever way, and you really are connected, yes, you just have this feeling of wishing well. So that becomes like a field, just a field of metta. And then I would simply imagine, have different people walk through the field. So I wasn't kind of directing it out. I was just sitting, creating the field, and then friends would walk through, and difficult people would walk through, and it was lovely, because then it was much less the feeling of me sending metta to you. Right? It was just creating that feeling field, and then basically inviting everybody into it. And it was lovely, and then it can be very spontaneous about who we think of to invite in, and you can just play, and you can be there and invite all the people you really love a lot in. Then when you're feeling particularly brave, invite some of the people who are challenging in your life, let them enter your field of metta. So you can play with these two different ways and see, what works for you. Okay, so let's settle into the practice for a bit. In doing the metta, it's generally helpful, as much as possible, to sit reasonably comfortably. If you're in a lot of pain, that can be distracting for the cultivation of metta, unless you're actually sending metta to the pain. So sit in a way that, as I say, is reasonably comfortable. You're not struggling with your posture. And I find it helpful to just let the attention settle in the area of the heart center, the area in the center of the chest. And simply begin, feel the breath there. Just the feeling of the breath. You could think of it as going in and out of the heart center, or just feeling the energy at that space in the body. We're resting in that area, breathing gently. Then call to mind somebody for whom you have a natural feeling of love, of friendliness, or care. I suggest you pick an uncomplicated relationship. Just somebody where it's very simple and easy. You think of them and you feel good. You think of them and you want them to be happy. So just call them to mind and play with the image. See if you can hold the image, and maybe it'll be steady and maybe it'll be flickering, however it is, but you have a clear sense of who you're sending the metta towards. And then pick a few phrases of what you would most wish for yourself. And you might even spend the first minute or two with the linking phrase, just as I, whatever, just as I want to be happy, so may you be happy. Just as I want to be peaceful, so may you be peaceful. Find your own phrases. Don't rush through them. Connect the meaning with the person. And in a very light way, tune into the feeling behind the phrases. Keeping the person in mind as an image of the person, or just somehow the felt sense of the person. Expressing what you most wish for them. And notice what it feels like when you're most connected with that loving wish. What is that feeling like? Let either the image or the phrases be your anchor. And notice at those times when they evoke a particular noticeable feeling of well-wishing. May you be happy and peaceful. Now you live in safety and live with ease. And there will be many times when you're repeating the phrase and you don't have any particular feeling with it. That does not mean that you're devoid of metta. And so just keep with the phrases, keep with the image. Sometimes the feeling is stronger, sometimes it's weaker, sometimes it's not even noticeable. Or just keep going with the phrases, with the sense of the person. And then sometimes with a particular phrase we do have a noticeable feeling, oh yeah, this is what goodwill is. This is what metta is. You can either stay with the same person or call someone else to mind, surrounding them with the feeling of loving care. And it might be directing the phrases toward the image of them, or if you're settled into the feeling of metta, invite them simply into the field. Let them cross the field of your loving kindness. When the mind wanders, you can come back to the image, to the phrases, to the breath at the heart center. Sometimes it is necessary to reteach a thing its loveliness. You can settle the awareness on the breath at the heart center, letting each breath radiate the unspoken wish of loving care, sending each breath out into the world. As with all of this, you will learn from doing it. Just as I had to learn that speed metta wasn't wasn't the way. Okay, I had to do a whole bunch of really stupid things, but that's how we learn. We see what works, what doesn't work. I would just encourage you to incorporate this into your practice, and even in the walking. Also, sometimes it's beautiful just to be walking and doing the metta, either towards a particular person, or maybe you start doing metta towards everybody that you're passing. Maybe you're at home and walking down the street. May you be with everybody you see. May you be happy. May you be happy. It's worth playing with and developing and cultivating, because it becomes more and more who we are. Not something we do. Okay, thank you.